He was perhaps the most elegant villain the galaxy ever knew. A nobleman to his core, bearing the weight of centuries of lineage, yet wielding a lightsaber with lethal grace. He walked away from the light, convinced it had failed, only to embrace a darkness that consumed him. This is not just the story of Darth Tyrannus, the separatist leader. This is the history of Count Dooku of Sereno. Welcome to Logfire Lore. I'm your storyteller tonight, and we're settling in for a journey into the life of a man whose fall was a slow, deliberate walk into shadow, paved with disillusionment and a profound, tragic conviction. Stoke the fire, settle deep into your chair, and let's unravel the complex tapestry of Count Dooku. Chapter 1. The Stormborn Heir. Sereno. A name whispered with respect and trepidation across the mid-rim. Not a world defined by bustling metropolises or technological marvels, but by ancient stones, towering cliffs lashed by eternal storms, and a lineage of power stretching back millennia. Its ruling counts commanded not just armies or wealth, but tradition, a fierce, unyielding belief in their world's sovereign destiny, distinct from the grasping tendrils of the Galactic Republic. To be born into House Sereno was to inherit a mantle heavier than Durasteel, a legacy etched in the very bedrock of the planet. Into this crucible of dynastic pride, amidst the howling gales and the stern gaze of his father, Count Gora, Dooku Sereno was born. From his earliest memories, Dooku understood he was not merely a child, but an heir. His nursery rhymes were tales of ancestral valor, his playthings, miniature representations of statecraft. Count Gora, a man carved from the same obsidian as his palaces, embodied Sereno's core tenets: autonomy, strength, suspicion. He viewed the Republic not as a protector, but as a voracious leviathan, its bureaucracy a tool for homogenization, and its Jedi Knights as agents of cultural erosion. The Republic sought to bind the galaxy under a single banner. Sereno proudly flew its own, tattered though it might be by the winds of isolation. Young Dooku absorbed this worldview like the damp Sereno air. Duty wasn't an abstract concept, it was the stone floor beneath his feet. Legacy wasn't a distant promise, it was the weight of generations pressing upon his small shoulders. He learned the intricate dance of power, not through force primarily, but through intellect, manipulation, and the subtle art of leverage. He observed his father navigate the treacherous currents of noble politics, understanding that control was the ultimate currency, tradition its most potent shield. Stability, his father taught, flowed from unwavering structure, from knowing one's place and defending it with ruthless precision. The chaotic galaxy beyond Sereno's storms was a warning, not an invitation. Yet, beneath the meticulously cultivated aristocratic veneer, something potent and unsettling stirred. It wasn't rebellion, not initially, it was a sensitivity. A hyper-awareness of the currents in the air, the unspoken tensions in a room, the latent energy humming within living things. He could feel the approaching storm before the clouds gathered, sense the flicker of fear in a servant's eyes before it surfaced. This was the Force, a wild, untamed river flowing counter to the rigid, man-made channels of Sereno's society. Imagine the profound internal schism. The heir, groomed to command a fiercely independent world, intrinsically bound to its history and prejudices, simultaneously feeling a connection to an energy field that bound all life, all worlds, together. The Force whispered of unity, of surrender to a greater flow. Sereno demanded separation, control, and dominion. This fundamental conflict, this war between heritage and destiny, would become the bedrock of his being. The eventual arrival of a Jedi delegation was less a diplomatic visit and more an act of celestial intervention, crashing into Sereno's carefully guarded reality. To Count Gora, It was to be an unconscionable violation, a theft perpetrated under the guise of galactic law. These robed figures, emanating serene authority, spoke of a calling higher than bloodline, a duty beyond planetary borders. They spoke of Dooku. Arguments erupted in the Grand Hall, cold fury clashing against unbending resolve. Gora saw only the theft of his planet's future embodied in his son. The Jedi saw a child of immense, dangerous potential who belonged to a wider destiny. Republic statutes and ancient Jedi traditions held sway. The Force, they maintained, was a galactic birthright, not a dynastic heirloom. Against his father's protests, the young boy, perhaps only 4 or 5 standard years old, was led away. Dooku was leaving the only world he knew, the echoing stone halls that were his birthright, and the crushing weight of dynastic expectations. It was replaced instead with the vast, sterile corridors of the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, a planet city that pulsed with artificial life. Bathed in perpetual garish light, it was utterly alien to the primal darkness of his home. His first profound lesson wasn't in telekinesis or meditation, it was dislocation. It was the hollow ache of severance, the first crack in the foundation of his identity. He was no longer Dooku Sereno, heir to a countship. He was Dooku, Jedi initiate, his new path that had begun. Chapter 2. The Perfect Jedi, the Restless Mind. The Jedi Temple presented a universe diametrically opposed to everything Sereno represented. Austere minimalism replaced Gothic opulence. Communal living supplanted aristocratic isolation. The concept of detachment, the shedding of personal attachments and worldly possessions, stood in stark contrast to the heritage that defined his bloodline. The Jedi sought to dissolve the self into the service of the whole. Sereno demanded the self be elevated to embody the whole. The dissonance must have been jarring, a constant hum beneath the surface of his new life. His assignment to a master was a statement in itself. Grand Master Yoda, the wisest, most powerful Jedi of the age, a being centuries old, choosing a troubled, aristocratic boy as his personal Padawan. It spoke volumes about the sheer, untamed power Yoda sensed within Dooku, a potential that outweighed the obvious challenges of his background and temperament. Yoda's training emphasized patience, intuition, and a profound connection to the living force. He taught through parables, observation, and often frustratingly cryptic guidance, pushing Dooku to feel the force, to listen to it, rather than merely command it. It was a philosophy rooted in acceptance, worlds away from the rigid statecraft and control mechanisms of Sereno. Dooku, however, proved to be a phenomenally gifted learner. His keen intellect, already honed by Sereno's finest tutors in history, strategy, and rhetoric, devoured Jedi philosophy, ethics, and galactic politics. He didn't just learn, he analyzed, dissected, and sought to synthesize. His natural affinity for the Force was prodigious, a deep wellspring of power that responded readily to his disciplined focus. But it was his approach to the lightsaber that truly set him apart. Rejecting the brute strength of Jem So, Form 5, or the aggressive acrobatics of Ataru, Form 4, he was drawn irresistibly to Makashi, Form 2, the way of the Yesala Miri, the duelist's art. Makashi was elegance incarnate. Precise footwork, minimal movement, blade work focused on accuracy, timing, and exploiting an opponent's openings. It emphasized control, economy, and finesse over raw power. It mirrored his Sereno upbringing, power applied not through bluster, but through calculated, decisive, almost surgical precision. It wasn't merely combat, it was a deadly ballet. He mastered its intricacies with relentless dedication, his skills becoming legendary within the temple halls. He rose through the ranks with remarkable speed. Padawan to knight, then still relatively young, to the esteemed rank of Jedi Master. He earned respect for his formidable intellect, his strategic acumen, and his unparalleled skill with the blade. He was often called upon for delicate negotiations or missions requiring a certain diplomatic finesse. Yet, alongside this respect, bloomed a distinct wariness. He was Dooku the Thinker, admired for his penetrating insights, but viewed with caution for his sharp tongue, his unwavering convictions, and an aura of aloof superiority that seemed woven into his very being. He carried himself not just as a Jedi Master, but as a Count in exile, with an air of innate authority that sometimes bordered on disdain. He questioned council protocols not out of rebellion, but from a place of deep intellectual scrutiny, often leaving his peers feeling dissected rather than debated. Chapter 3. The Cracks in the Foundation and the Maverick Padawan. Dooku never truly shed Sereno. It lived within him, an internal compass constantly recalibrating his perception of the Jedi Order and the Republic it served. He viewed the Order not solely through the lens of a peacekeeper, but increasingly through the critical eye of a nobleman trained in governance. And what he saw began to disturb him profoundly. He perceived a creeping complacency within the Jedi High Council. He watched them, ensconced in their lofty tower on Coruscant, becoming reactive rather than proactive, entangled in the often petty politics of a republic he saw as fundamentally flawed. The Council's decisions, grounded in millennia of tradition, sometimes felt stagnant, even dogmatic, hindering swift, decisive action when it was desperately needed. Their wisdom seemed calcified, their vision myopic, focused on maintaining a fragile peace rather than addressing the festering injustices that threatened to shatter it. His gaze extended beyond the temple's tranquil gardens. He saw the rot metastasizing within the Galactic Senate, a bloated, self-serving bureaucracy seemingly more interested in credit flows, corporate lobbying, and political horse trading than in upholding the Republic's founding ideals of freedom, democracy, and justice, especially for the countless systems on the distant, neglected fringes of the Outer Rim. The Republic, to Dooku's analytical mind, was a crumbling edifice draped in a faded, hypocritical banner. Its core principles were hollowed out by greed and incompetence. He believed passionately in order, not necessarily the tyrannical rigidity of his father's world, but a rational, enlightened order based on reason, meritocracy, and effective, centralized authority wielded by those best equipped to wield it. He saw the Republic failing spectacularly to provide this, and the Jedi, bound by their code and their subservience to this failing system, as unwilling or unable to stem the tide of decay. His disillusionment wasn't born of malice, but of a profound, almost painful conviction that things could and should be vastly better. This conviction festered into a deep intellectual frustration. He became the Council's most persistent internal critic, his arguments sharp and meticulously logical. He advocated fiercely for the Jedi to transcend their role as mere peacekeepers and guardians, and argued they must take a proactive, assertive stance in fixing the Republic's systemic ills. He saw the Jedi as uniquely positioned to be architects of a better galaxy, not just its repairmen. This stance earned him grudging respect for his intellect and foresight, but solidified his image as an aloof, difficult traditionalist in his own unique way, a conservative revolutionary, demanding a return to a purer, more effective application of Jedi principles. Then came Qui-Gon Jinn. The decision to take Qui-Gon as his Padawan stands as perhaps the most defining and ultimately tragic relationship of Dooku's life within the Jedi Order. Qui-Gon was, by Jedi standards, a maverick. He embodied everything the Council often cautioned against: fierce independence, guided by strong emotion, and a deep, almost mystical connection to the living force that often led him to follow his own interpretation of its will, placing him frequently at odds with protocol and the Council's directives. He was impulsive, passionate, and unafraid to challenge authority when his conscience dictated. Yet Dooku saw in him not a problem, but a potent kindred spirit. Qui-Gon's unwavering commitment to acting on what he felt was morally right, regardless of rules or political consequences, resonated powerfully with Dooku's own simmering frustrations. Here was a Jedi who didn't just meditate on problems, he solved them, often messily, but decisively. Dooku didn't attempt to crush this spirit. Instead, he sought to hone it, to temper its recklessness without extinguishing its fire. He recognized the raw power, immense potential, and unshakable moral compass within the young man and aimed to channel it. Their training sessions were notoriously demanding, pushing Qui-Gon to his limits not just physically, but intellectually and philosophically. Dooku nurtured Qui-Gon's connection to the living force, seeing it as a vital and underutilized tool. He saw in his Padawan the embodiment of the Jedi Knight he believed the Order desperately needed, a living argument for his reformist ideals. Their bond transcended the typical master-apprentice dynamic. It was a meeting of brilliant, unconventional minds, a shared questioning of the established path, though from different angles. Qui-Gon challenged Dooku's rigidity. Dooku provided Qui-Gon with structure and strategic depth. He pushed him relentlessly, demanding excellence bordering on perfection, but beneath the stern exterior lay profound guidance and, in his characteristically reserved manner, genuine affection and pride. When Qui-Gon finally achieved knighthood, Dooku's satisfaction was immense, a rare moment of unguarded fulfillment. Chapter 4: The Gathering Shadow and the Nexus of Tragedy. Dooku's disillusionment, however, continued to deepen like a slow-acting poison. As a senior master, he undertook missions that thrust him into the visceral heart of the Republic's decay. He witnessed firsthand the brutal exploitation of resource-rich Outer Rim worlds. Populations kept in poverty and neglect by corporate greed and political indifference, while core worlds like Coruscant thrived in obscene opulence. He saw the Galactic Senate, the supposed heart of democracy, paralyzed by self-interest, backroom deals, and factional squabbling, utterly incapable of addressing systemic injustices or looming crises. He watched his fellow Jedi stretched impossibly thin, valiantly rushing from flashpoint to flashpoint, putting out fires ignited by political corruption, while the architects of that corruption remained untouched, shielded by privilege and procedure. The High Council's caution, their adherence to due process and diplomatic niceties, even when swift, decisive intervention was morally imperative, began to feel less like wisdom and more like cowardice, or worse, complicity in maintaining a broken, unjust status quo. The seeds planted on Sereno, the fierce belief in planetary autonomy and the deep-seated distrust of distant, centralized power, began to sprout dark shoots of doubt and simmering anger within him. His critiques grew sharper, his disillusionment more profound. He began to question not just the Republic's structure, but the Jedi Order's very foundation. Was their sacred connection to the Force being squandered? Were they, by binding themselves so intrinsically to a failing Republic, becoming part of the problem, their light merely illuminating the decay without cleansing it? This period of escalating doubt coincided with a dangerous intellectual pursuit. His investigations into the roots of corruption, his sense that something deeper was poisoning the Republic, led him towards ancient, forbidden knowledge. Whispers of the Sith, long thought extinct, began to surface in his research. He believed that understanding this ancient darkness, its strategies and philosophies, was crucial to defeating its resurgence. His studies were secretive, conducted in restricted archives or remote locations, a dangerous flirtation with the abyss driven by intellectual arrogance and a conviction in his own incorruptibility. Crucially, it was during this period, years before the Naboo crisis, that the Shadow first made deliberate contact. His discreet inquiries and his growing reputation as a brilliant but disaffected master drew the attention of the galaxy's hidden puppet master, Darth Sidious. The Sith Lord, operating from the shadows of Coruscant's political underworld, and soon its Senate, recognized in Dooku the ultimate instrument. Here was a man of impeccable reputation, vast intellect, formidable power, profound disillusionment with the status quo, and a deep-seated hunger for order. A hunger Sidious knew how to twist. Sidious began a subtle, patient campaign of manipulation. Through encrypted channels, intermediaries, or perhaps even carefully staged chance encounters cloaked in anonymity, Sidious validated Dooku's critiques and amplified his disdain for the Council's perceived weakness and the Senate's corruption. It was here that he planted the first seeds of a radical solution. The Republic was beyond saving, and only its dismantling could there rise a new, rational order. Sidious preyed masterfully on Dooku's core beliefs and frustrations, carefully nurturing his growing estrangement from the Jedi path. This wasn't yet apprenticeship, it was seduction, a slow drip of poison into a mind already questioning the light. Shortly before the Naboo crisis, Sidious presented a crucial, clandestine task: the creation of an army. He revealed a Jedi visionary, Master Sifo-Dyas, who foresaw a coming darkness and believed the Republic needed a military. Sidious, possibly also manipulating Sifo-Dyas's fears, guided them to commission a clone army on Kamino. Dooku's role was to be twofold: ensuring Sifo-Dyas placed the order using Republic funds, likely embezzled or misdirected by Sidious's political pawns, and then eliminate the loose ends, including all Jedi archive material on the planet Kamino and Master Sifo-Dyas. Dooku, now convinced this army was necessary for his vision of a new galactic order, agreed. The Grand Clone Army of the Republic was commissioned on Kamino, using bounty hunter Jango Fett as its genetic template. With the army ordered, Dooku now acted with cold pragmatism. As instructed, Dooku orchestrated Sifo-Dyas's death. He hired the Pike Syndicate, ruthless spice runners operating in the Outer Rim, to ambush Sifo-Dyas's shuttle over the Obadiah Moon, shooting it down and ensuring the Jedi Master who ordered the army would never be able to speak of it. This calculated murder, years before open war, marked Dooku's first irreversible step into the Sith abyss. He justified it as necessary for the greater good, securing the tool that would save the galaxy from the Republic's rot. The ends justified the means. The idealist was learning Sith calculus. Chapter 5. The Point of No Return. That same year, 32 BBY, the Naboo crisis shook the galaxy. Qui-Gon Jinn, sent to resolve the Trade Federation's illegal blockade, encountered something terrifying and thought impossible: a Sith Lord, Darth Maul. This confrontation struck Dooku like a physical blow. His former Padawan, the embodiment of his hopes for the Jedi's future, was now facing the ancient enemy he himself had been privately working with by proxy. When exactly he connected this menace to Sidious is unknown, but perhaps by the time he realized, it was already too late. A devastating blow followed swiftly. Qui-Gon Jinn was dead, struck down by Darth Maul on Naboo. The loss was shattering, a wound that tore through decades of mentorship and shared ideals. Qui-Gon represented the potential of the Jedi, morally driven, connected to the living force, willing to act. For Dooku, his death was a brutal, undeniable indictment of the Jedi Order's failures. Grief, white-hot fury, and a profound sense of betrayal washed over Dooku. The Jedi Council had failed his Padawan, The Republic's corruption had created the perfect environment for the darkness to exploit, and now he had to wrestle with the guilt he felt for his own part in his Padawan's death. The last shred light left within Dooku was now battling for survival. It was in the immediate raw aftermath of this cataclysm, while Qui-Gon's funeral pyre was prepared on Naboo, that Dooku confronted his Dark Master. This confrontation was quickly cut short, however, when Jedi Master Yaddle, one of the oldest, wisest, and most compassionate members of the Council, tracked him down. Master Yaddle had sensed a dangerous, growing disturbance surrounding Dooku, a darkness that had deepened alarmingly since Qui-Gon's death. During Dooku's confrontation with Sidious, she appeared and spoke to him directly, not with accusation, but with profound concern, appealing to the Jedi Master he once was. She warned him of the perilous path he was treading, urging him to return to the light, to grieve with his brethren, and to face this Sith threat together as Jedi. The confrontation crackled with tension. Yaddle represented almost everything Dooku blamed for Qui-Gon's death: the Jedi Order's complacency, its dogmatic adherence to a failed system, and its inability to combat the true darkness. To Dooku, consumed by grief, disillusionment, and the seductive promises Sidious offered, Yaddle wasn't a voice of reason. She was an obstacle. She embodied the passive, ineffective light he now despised. She threatened his vital, secret work he believed only he, guided by Sidious's pragmatic insights, could perform. What followed was brief, brutal, and irrevocable. Dooku, fueled by his burgeoning connection to the dark side and a desperate need to silence this final link to the Jedi conscience, struck her down. Killing Yaddle, a revered council master, with his own hands was Dooku's absolute plunge into the abyss. It wasn't just murder, it was symbolic patricide, the destruction of the Jedi Order's wisdom. It severed any remaining tether to his former life, and proved, horrifically, that Sidious's whispers had taken root. The ends justified any means, even the annihilation of the light within himself. The noble critic, the grieving master, was gone. Darth Tyrannus was born. Chapter 6: The Count, the Confederacy, and Lord Tyrannus. Compounding his turmoil, news arrived from Sereno that his sister, Genza, had died. The circumstances were murky, entangled in the ruthless power struggles of the noble house he had abandoned decades before. The call of blood and the weight of his forsaken legacy crashed over him amidst the maelstrom of Qui-Gon's death, Yaddle's murder, and his pact with Sidious. Grief piled upon grief, guilt upon guilt. He requested leave from the Jedi Council, a request delivered with a finality he alone understood, and returned to Sereno not as Jedi Master Dooku, but as Dooku Sereno, the exiled heir. He found Sereno subtly decaying under the rule of his power-hungry brother, Ramil. The Jedi detachment he had cultivated for decades shattered completely. The nobleman, the Count's son, reawakened with ferocious intensity. He intervened decisively, using his Jedi-honed intellect, strategic brilliance, and now unleashed force abilities not in service to the Republic, but solely for Sereno. He meticulously uncovered Ramil's plot, exposed his brother's treachery to the other noble houses, and reclaimed his birthright through a combination of political maneuvering and unspoken menace. He discarded the Jedi insignia, the robes, the pretense, and became Count Dooku, sovereign ruler of Sereno. This was far more than a homecoming. It was a public declaration of a new identity forged in darkness. He formally severed his ties with the Jedi Order. The reasons presented were a tapestry of grief and dynastic duty, masking the deeper truth. The Jedi path was obsolete, corrupted by its ties to a dying republic, and he had embraced a darker, more effective power. He returned his Jedi lightsaber to the temple, not as an act of respect, but as the final contemptuous severing of a bond that died with Master Yaddle. As Count of Sereno, Dooku transformed into a formidable and magnetic figure on the galactic political stage. He wielded his planet's immense wealth and his own formidable intellect like finely crafted weapons. He became the galaxy's most eloquent voice for planetary rights and a scathing, relentless critic of the Republic corruption, bureaucratic bloat, and core world exploitation. He traveled extensively, engaged in high-level debates with senators, and authored influential, widely read treatises on governance. He attracted a growing circle of followers from the Outer Rim's disillusioned inhabitants. He positioned himself not as a revolutionary, yet, but as a disaffected idealist, a reformer operating from a position of significant independent power on the Republic's periphery. His charisma was undeniable. His arguments, honed by decades of Jedi logic and Sereno rhetoric, were devastatingly effective. He offered not just critique, but a vision of a different way. All the while, his partnership with Darth Sidious solidified into a formal Sith covenant. Sidious, observing Dooku's clean break from the Jedi and his consolidation of power on Sereno, saw the tool was ready. He formally elevated Dooku, bestowing the Sith mantle. Darth Tyrannus, Tyrant. Dooku embraced the name, seeing not the monstrous connotation, but the harsh necessity it implied. Tyranny, to his warped perspective, was merely order imposed decisively upon chaos, the rational governance that was required to purge the galaxy's sickness. He believed the alliance was pragmatic, a meeting of equals. His vision, intellect, and political legitimacy combined with Sidious's ancient knowledge, dark power, and hidden influence. He saw himself as the co-architect of galactic renewal, the public face and strategic mind to Sidious's shadowy mastery. This delusion of partnership was Sidious's most crucial tool. Operating as Tyrannus, Dooku became the hidden architect of the coming cataclysm. He was the master recruiter, the hidden hand building the separatist war machine. He targeted the disgruntled and ambitious, the Trade Federation, humiliated and fined after Naboo, the commerce guilds and corporate alliance, chafing under Republic regulations, the banking clan, seeking profit and leverage, and the techno-union, eager for military contracts. He promised them freedom from Republic bureaucracy, lucrative monopolies in the New Order, and a share of political power. He used Sereno's vast wealth and his political networks to funnel resources, overseeing the construction of vast droid foundries on Geonosis, Hyperi, and other hidden worlds. Publicly, as Count Dooku, he remained the charismatic, rational statesman. His reputation as a former Jedi Master and respected nobleman lent immense weight to his words. His Raxus address, delivered to a rapt audience of separatist sympathizers and the galactic media, was not mere propaganda. It was the powerful, passionate culmination of his lifelong critiques. He spoke with eloquence and fervor about Republic corruption, Jedi's subservience to a failed state, and the inalienable right of sovereign systems to determine their own futures. He painted the separatist cause not as rebellion, but as a noble, necessary fight for freedom, self-determination, and liberation from a tyrannical, decaying superstate. Millions across the galaxy, weary of Republic neglect, inspired by his compelling rhetoric, believed him implicitly. They saw the eloquent Count, the philosopher-statesman, the victim of Jedi narrow-mindedness, not the Sith Lord Darth Tyrannus, manipulating them from the deepest shadows. This duality was his most potent weapon and his deepest, most tragic irony. He genuinely saw the confederacy of independent systems as the righteous instrument of his new order, utterly blind to the fact that Sidious had engineered the entire conflict solely to destroy the Jedi, centralize power, and establish his own galactic empire. Dooku was meticulously building his own gilded execution chamber. Chapter 7. The Grand Design and the Sacrificial Pawn. When the Clone Wars erupted with the Battle of Geonosis, Count Dooku stood openly at the helm of the Confederacy of Independent Systems, the political leader of the Separatist cause. He commanded its vast droid legions and directed its strategic campaigns from hidden strongholds. He battled those who were once his comrades. His former master, Yoda, Mace Windu, and Obi-Wan Kenobi, as well as soon-to-be Jedi Knight, Anakin Skywalker, whose power fascinated and unnerved him. Throughout the war, Dooku remained convinced. The conflict was a necessary purge. The Republican Jedi had to fall for his rational order to rise. He dueled with cold precision, seeing former friends as obstacles to galactic salvation. He believed he and Sidious were partners steering history, and never grasped the horrific totality of Sidious's deception. He never saw he was always a disposable tool, nurtured in delusion, until Anakin was ready. Sidious stoked Dooku's pride to ensure his usefulness until the very end, when Dooku's belief in his control, his partnership, his destiny, was extinguished not merely by Anakin's blade, but by Sidious's command. The culmination of a manipulation that began years ago. His tragedy was the maintained conviction until the final, shocking second that he was the Count, the architect, the Sith Lord shaping history, never the pawn being sacrificed for the Emperor's throne. Count Dooku's story is a meticulously engineered descent, a brilliant mind, magnetic presence, formidable power, and a deep belief in order, all twisted towards darkness by a disillusionment groomed by a Sith Lord. He was the heir who left home, the perfect Jedi who lost faith, the master who mourned his Padawan, the brother who reclaimed a throne stained by betrayal, the co-architect of an army birthed in murder, the Jedi who killed a council master, and the Sith Lord utterly convinced he had outwitted the darkness. His legacy is a galactic-scale tragedy, the path to tyranny paved with stones of good intentions, intellectual arrogance, and the fatal conviction that one is too wise to be used. His shadow, long and elegant, is a monument to the seductive danger of the power of the dark side. Thank you for joining Logfire Lore on this deep dive into Count Dooku's shadowed history. If you enjoyed this and crave more, hit the subscribe button. You can also visit our channel page and vote for which character's story you'd like unraveled next. Until then, stay warm.